Welcome in, everyone. It's Blake Ruffino with Are You Serious Sports. We're back again here at Service Hawk Digital Media. Hopefully, and I'm pretty sure we figure out the audio this time. I apologize for what happened the last time, but we are back here with our good friends over at Service Hawk. Greatly appreciate Lee and the gang for allowing us to be here. Today's special episode of AYS is brought to you by our good friends over at C&D Plumbing. If you have plumbing problems, trust the pros over at C&D Plumbing, serving the river region with fast, reliable, and residential and commercial service. C&D has earned the reputation for quality and honesty. When you need a plumber that you can count on, you got to call C&D Plumbing. 985-304-8556. That's 985-304-8556, where your problem is their top priority. So, look, we got a lot that we got to get into today on this separate episode. We're going to be continuing to talk about the portal. So last night, we were live when the Nick Anderson news happened. I thought it was pretty interesting that when the Nick Anderson news happened, we literally, before we went to a break, said I came out and I said, hey, listen, I think that of all these guys that are out there, Singleton, Branch, and Anderson would be the one that I would go after based off of what you had in your room already and the upside that I think that Anderson has. I would definitely go in his direction. And as soon as we hit the commercial break, bam, he committed. So I wanted to go in a little bit more detail, a little bit more depth of what has happened in the portal, especially at receiver right now, and kind of break that down. So yesterday, as we just mentioned, Nick Anderson committed to LSU. He's signed now officially with LSU. As a redshirted freshman, he had 38 catches, 798 yards, and 10 touchdowns, which broke an Oklahoma freshman record. So let's start there. I think that Nick Anderson is a bona fide number one guy. Now, he got injured last year, and you're going to have to see how he responds. You're going to have to see how he is coming off of an injury. But at 6'4", 215 pounds, even if he gains up to 5 pounds, I don't think he loses speed at 220. I don't think he loses his versatility. A guy that we saw at times that can line up on the boundary. He can line up at the slot. He can do a lot of specific things. But what's interesting about Nick Anderson is the amount of times that he was in the red zone at Oklahoma with an experienced quarterback in Dylan Gabriel 2 years ago, how many times that he was able to find the end zone and go up and high point the football and come down with it in contested situations. You know, we talked about this last night, but to reemphasize it again too, him having the game-winning touchdown catch against Texas. I mean, he's going up against a really good corner. He goes up and he high points the football, and he ends the game for Oklahoma. He ends the game and sends Texas packing in what was their only loss in the regular season 2 years ago. Guys, he can be a bona fide number one. Of all the receivers, you know, you can make the argument of Singleton, Branch, him, whoever, that he arguably is the best wide receiver in the transfer portal, and LSU needed receivers. The room was a lot of inexperienced young guys that you thought could be talented, but you probably didn't know where you would be able to turn as a bona fide number one. And it takes the pressure off of Aaron Anderson too, who had a really good year, but Aaron is not a guy that you can line up in multiple spots. Nick Anderson is. So now when you look at the addition of Nick Anderson and arguably the number one portal wide receiver, I think that he is and can be and has the ability to be your number one wide receiver. Guys, he is a guy that I think that when we look back at it, and if he can continue and he stays healthy and he has the production or just stays healthy, he's going to have the production. I mean, Oklahoma could not keep him off the field. And look, he was their third option in the beginning of the season coming in as a redshirted freshman because they had Stoops, they had Farouk, they had other guys that Dylan Gabriel could go to. But at the end of the season, if you look at Dylan Gabriel and what they were doing, he wound up becoming, especially in the red zone, their number one option. And I want to stop right there and talking about the red zone. LSU had a massive issue in the red zone last year. They would get down inside the 20s and they would sputter. Nick Anderson is a guy that you know that if he gets matched up one-on-one, that he instantly creates chaos for defenses on his ability of what he can do and going and high pointing the football on a fade route or being physical and having really good controlled catches and traffic. He can do a lot of specific things. And if defenses, which we saw this in the end of the year 2023, teams would shade, okay, to Anderson, because when they got in the red zone, they didn't want him to beat them. So then it opened up things for Stoops. It opened up things for Farouk. It opened up things for other guys. And so I think of a guy like Aaron Anderson. I think of a Barion Brown, who you also brought in from Kentucky, and just say to myself, well, look, him being on the field alone, literally. I don't know if y'all can hear the police and the sirens in the mic, but just in case. Either way, he definitely gives you the ability to do special things in the red zone. That is where he makes his living. That's where he's going to make his living. And here's the best thing about it, too. Just because he's a big body receiver does not stop the fact that he legitimately can be a weapon for you in all downs, in all situations, in so many different big key aspects here. Look, 38 catches for 798 yards. That's a lot of yardage for the amount of catches that he has. Big playability, was over the middle, can move and shake in the middle of the field, and he's not a statue. He's not a stone. He can move, he can shake, he can get where he needs to be. It is of my opinion that Nick Anderson, of all the receivers that are in the portal right now, the upside with him is bigger than anybody that has been in the portal, and that's with Singleton, that is with Branch, that is even with Barion Brown, that you also were able to land here. Let's talk about Barion Brown too, and then we'll just talk about the receiving core as a whole. Barion Brown, guys, I've seen a lot of different things in reference to what people have said about Barion Brown, specifically on what LSU will do with him. Can he come here and be a good receiver? Here's what I know about Barion Brown. What I know about Barion Brown is very simple. Barion Brown has 122 catches in the SEC, and he was on a team that doesn't like to throw the football. That's enough for me. Literally, there is no more production that you can have. A guy that came in and that started as a freshman, has 1,500 receiving yards, 11 touchdowns, 5 kick return touchdowns, and 2 rushing touchdowns. So in 3 years, on a team that did not give him the ball more than 3 or 4 times a game, he still found a way to be highly productive, get catches, get yards, get touchdowns. Barion Brown also is a guy, when you look at the receivers that were in this transfer portal haul and this class in general, the upside is massive. Barion Brown could come into LSU and be an outright game changer for you. Do I think he could be a number 1 wide receiver? I don't know that. 122 catches in the SEC on a team that does not want to throw the football is insane to me. There's not going to be a guy outside of maybe 1 or 2 that has the production, and I don't think there is anybody in the SEC for sure that went into the portal that has that amount of production. Barion Brown and Nick Anderson together, it's a 1-2 combo and a different punch. You have a big body receiver and a guy that can absolutely fly. Now you put the onus on the defense. What are you going to try to take away? If you're going to single up Nick Anderson, nope, don't need to do that. You can't shade a safety over to his side, because Barion Brown can also be on the outside or in the slot and take the top off of defenses. Guys, rangy wide receiver that can go vertical. He can go sideline to sideline, and his speed is world class. LSU now puts pressure on every defense in the country based off of the speed and the athleticism that they have at receiver. That's not even mentioning Aaron Anderson, Chris Hilton, Jelani Watkins going into year 2. Now you're in a position where even if Destin Hill finally blossoms, you're in a position now where you're starting to, when I look at this room, and I know it's on paper, and there's a lot to go here. We're not even remotely close to touching the surface here. As I take a sip of the coffee, the pressure that you put on teams right now with what you've brought in receiver, I think Tyrone Francis could be a guy that could make some noise early. It is absolutely a great haul. It's a massive haul. You needed to go get wide receivers. What do you do with Chris Hilton? What do you do with Aaron Anderson, Xavier Thomas? how do you incorporate all of those guys? Here's the good thing. You have a multitude of ways to incorporate all 4 or 5 of these wide receivers that, man, you can rotate some guys in and out here. You can go in special packages. You have the weapons now. If you're Garrett Nussmeier, there is no more there's no I don't want to say excuse because it's not like it was an excuse in general, but there's no more adage on you not having dudes. You have production, you have weapons. Guys, you talk to anybody that's a draft guy, they think Barion Brown can work himself into the first round. I was listening to a podcast with McShay the other day, and he had talked about Brown working himself into a first round, and even Nick Anderson. A lot of people think that too. Can Aaron Anderson work himself into that? A guy that didn't have production, a high production in 2023, then came on in 2024, the former 5-star. He is an outright mismatch in the slot. How you get these guys involved, man, it's a big deal. I love absolutely everything that you have done in the portal and the additions and just the guys that you already have right now. Let's get to some other guys that I think LSU, but that other guys that LSU is attacking in the portal and guys that they already got. Let me start off with this because this was a big question yesterday, and I want to go ahead and get it out there. And so just in case, we are recording this, so if there is news that has broken before that we release this video, I just want to make sure that, everybody knows that we've seen it. We're recording this at the time, and then when we publish it, it is what it is. But LSU got a commitment the other day from Mansour Delane, the DB out of Virginia Tech. And here's the interesting thing. I said this on Monday, and I think it kind of got pushed and swept under the rug, and it was okay because, look, you're excited. I was excited. We briefly mentioned it, but we need to monitor. Mansour Delane is a fantastic DB. He can play safety. He can play boundary corner. There's so many things that he has shown in the ACC with a lot of really good passing offenses that he can do and that he can contribute. There is a concern here for me, and it's going to be interesting. There's no real indication yet as to what's going to happen, but he has committed to you. He has signed to you. But him going somewhere else, I'm not really worried about Mansour Delane going somewhere else. There is a question of if he'll enter the draft. Now, my co-host on our national show, Joe DeLeon, as soon as Delane committed, he texted me. He was like, he does a lot of draft coverage, and he's like, man, I'm really surprised that this young man didn't go in the draft. And so we started having the conversation. So when Joe told me that, I just started sending out a couple of text messages like, hey, does this kid have the ability to go in the draft? How do you feel? And they're like, yeah, there still is a chance that he can. Let's talk about both of those. Number one, LSU does have a backup plan that if Mansour Delane does go in the draft, they're going to continue to look at safety and even boundary corner. I think for what it's worth, the Delane pickup solved so many issues for you in this sense. It solved the issues for you, number one, in that he can play boundary if DJ Pickett can't come in and things are a little too fast for him early. He can play the boundary. But the big thing that I don't think that people understand here is that Mansour Delane played safety. You need safeties. More than you can breathe, more than you need Christmas presents, more than you need anything else in this world, LSU needs safeties. Hell, everybody in the country needs safeties. That's why it's so targeted and why you saw Miami and Georgia and Texas and LSU. All these big schools went after a guy like Zachariah Poyser, who you were after as well, and went after him at safety. So Mansour Delane solves so many issues for you. Is there a chance that he can go into the draft? Absolutely, there's a chance he can go into the draft. And talking about both of them, if he goes in the draft, it is what it is. You're back at square one. I've talked to some people around the program. I still think that they have plans in place for if Delane goes in the draft, that it's a loss. I mean, you were bringing the kid in. You were hoping he was going to be with you. But if he's here, the sky is the limit for this young man. I could see a world where he's at a boundary and specific packages. You move him into safety. When his team needed him the most last year, he moved into safety and got a pick. And I think for me, he's the biggest pickup that you have right now, even more than Nick Anderson. The reason I think that he was the biggest addition for you was because of it is your biggest need. Guys, there is no bigger need for you and LSU or football in general than you needing to go get safeties. Let's call it like we see it. Last year and the year before, you had massive issues at safety when it came to the quarterback run game. Your safeties ran away from quarterbacks in the QB run game. Sage Ryan against Lenore Sellers. Sage Ryan, Major Burns against Jalen Milroe. Whatever you want to point out, whatever you want to look at, whatever game you want to look at, that LSU gave a lot of yardage on the ground. Safety play was abysmal. I'm not trying to poo-poo on any of those young men, but it's just the truth and the reality. Mansour Delane has shown that he is, without a doubt, and without a doubt at all, somebody that will stick his nose into a run game fit, and he is going to tackle well in space. He's not scared to tackle. It's not like the ACC doesn't have talent, man. I mean, Syracuse has got a good running back. Miami's got a good running back. He played teams that have really physical running backs. You know, I look at that Miami game as an example, and they had Damian Martinez. Damian Martinez is 235 pounds, and there was a couple of plays there where Delane came up from the box when they did some special things with him at safety, and Martinez would break through the first couple of levels, and then here comes Mansour Delane and hitting him right in the knees and taking him down for a 6-yard loss, or 6-yard gain, where LSU would have given up a 20, 25, even a plus that 30, 35-yard gain down the field. The kid, he solves so many issues for you. Is there a concern for me right now at the current moment that he could go in the draft? Yes, there is. Now, he can come out and say whatever he wants and say I'm going or I'm staying. He did post a couple of things on social media, but that is a concern. He could do that. Now, do I think that the kid could work himself into a first-round pick? 100%. 100%. If Mansour Delane comes to LSU and plays this next season, he can be a first-round pick. He's going to have to make that decision for himself, but I think the versatility for him is sky high right now, so it is what it is. All right. As I take a sip, and I'm not even paid by these people. This 7 Brew drive-through coffee place, I'm not even paid by these people, but I'm sitting here on a live show or a recorded show that's probably going to get, 5 to 10,000 people watching and listening to it. So 7 Brew, if you're watching this, y'all need to pay your boy. That's all I'm saying. All right, let's move right along here. So there are a couple of guys that LSU is going to continue to be after. Let's talk about 3 of the big ones here. Sadir Mitchell, the DT out of Texas. Massive body. Massive human being. 6'6", 350. Guys, you need him. I mean, look, I told you this last night. I'm going to emphasize this again. Sadir Mitchell, the DT out of Texas, who was recruited by now your defensive line coach, Bo Davis. I keep seeing a lot of people saying, well, Blakey doesn't have the stats. You're right, he doesn't. But he preserved his red shirt as a true freshman and was a depth piece for Texas this past year. Guys, you can't, for a guy like Sadir Mitchell, you can't go to www.google.com and type in stats and see what this kid is. That's not his game. What his game is what does the film tell me? Here's what the film tells me about him. He's a space eater. Teams, when they try to double team him, he can stuff them at the line of scrimmage. And he is someone that can really come in, and he can be versatile. He can be a one-tech for you. And a one-tech being, if you don't know what a one-tech is, a DT that can play in between the guard and center, or he can line up at nose. Massive versatility with him that you quite simply did not have. Now, Jacoby and Guillory could have done that for you as the season went on. You were not able to have him throughout the season. So the versatility there is massive. I think he can come in here and play in early downs. Like now. Right now. And now you start looking at defensive tackle. That was an issue for you a year ago in a lot of key games. And now you start looking at the depth pieces and the pieces that LSU has at DT, and really what I consider personally year 1 under Bo Davis. If you're listening on the audio, I did an air quotes on that. I explained when Bo Davis got hired at LSU that it was like the Matt McMahon effect for me. Bo Davis coming in here, it was going to take more than 3 years to really see the production from that position group, because I thought he came into a really bad situation. LSU did not have the money to go out and get DTs out of the portal in the spring window. And now you're able to build through high school recruiting, which you got 4 guys there, and we'll go back to that in just a moment. But now you're adding pieces. You get Guillory coming back. What does Don McKinley look like in year 2? What does some of the Ahmad Bro look like? Even though I think Ahmad Bro can give you versatility in other situations now that you have the depth. But what Bo Davis has done in less than a year is highly impressive. Kudos to Bo Davis. I have not been more confident. Excuse me. I have not been more confident about defensive tackle than I am right now, because I look at the young depth. If you get in and bring in, not saying it's happening yet, but he is coming in on a visit, and we've been very vocal about Sadir Mitchell. He comes in and literally plugs a massive need. The versatility that Blake Baker and Bo Davis would have with him is also a massive need. I think bringing in a guy like Sadir Mitchell, too, also helps out a guy like Jack Pyburn. Let me explain. When you're able to get pushed guard versus DT in the run game, you don't necessarily have to worry about double teaming guys in the interior. You can work your way up to the second level. If you had a situation with Pyburn, Mitchell, Butler, whoever you want to put else in there, the versatility, the experience, the outright dominance that you could have along your Guillory, the outright dominance that McKinley, the dominance that you can have in your front line of scrimmage exceeds what you had this year. Now, I don't know if you have a premier pass rusher. Say Braden Swinson did that for you. But when I look at the line of scrimmage, you have massively upgraded on what you were a year ago. And quite honestly, if I'm going to be frank and blunt, I don't think that you've had this good of a defensive line rotation maybe since 22. That's pushing it for me. Definitely since 2019, you have not been this deep. You have not been this talented in this position group. I think it's a big deal. You go and spend the money to make Bo Davis one of, if not the highest paid position coach. You bring in Kevin Peoples because Blake Baker wants him to come in. Boom. You are now reaping the benefits. You are now reaping the rewards of doing that. Now, Texas Tech is going to be a player here for Mitchell. Texas Tech is out there spending money. Okay. And I feel good about where LSU stands at the current moment, right? Like I feel confident. I feel good where they stand. I'm going to tell you this like I tell you every single time. Regardless of my feelings as of 9:16 a.m. on Wednesday, regardless of my feeling, money talks and bullshit walks. So Texas Tech could come in here and do some things. Once a kid enters the portal, guys, I'm just going to tell you, anything can happen. Anything can happen. You know, I said this last night. I was invited to a Twitter Spaces. I didn't want to go in there and stay long, but somebody asked me about Singleton. I'm like, bro, Auburn throwing around that money. And I think that the kid could go to Auburn. So it doesn't matter anymore, man. It does. When money starts flying around in college football today, you can't mark down anybody. Now, for those of you that are just football fans and you don't watch college baseball, I have learned very quickly that even in college baseball, when kids start entering the portal, it doesn't matter. That money starts flying. It is what it is. But I think Sadir Mitchell could come in here and be a difference maker for you. Okay. Braylon Moore, the center out of Virginia Tech. Look, I know that it's been trending that direction. We'll see how that goes until he makes an announcement. I don't ever count your chickens or eggs before your chickens hatch, or however the saying goes. I think you need a center. I think Braylon Moore is someone that started as a young freshman. I think that he is someone that in the last, 24 straight games that he started. He's only given up 22 pressures, so it's less than one pressure a game. He's given up 5 sacks. Those 5 sacks came as a true starter, and then all of a sudden something clicked for him, and he started becoming one of the best centers in not only the ACC, but in all of college football. Guys, Braylon Moore, for what it's worth, regardless of the price tag or money that you put on him, there is no amount of money that can solve your issues at center more than this young man can. The experience, the starts, being a actual true center outside of DJ Chester. Braylon Moore is someone that I think that we know that we need a center. Offensive line is not a position where you start looking at it and saying, oh, this is a sexy pickup. It's going to be one of the biggest pickups that you have. You need to start dominating on the line of scrimmages. Braylon Moore can get you in the right protections. He knows. Look, I talked to somebody that also is recruiting Braylon Moore outside of LSU. And I'll tell you that what the offensive line coach, who's in the SEC, by the way, told me literally 2 days ago about Braylon Moore. They think that he might be the smartest offensive center that they had talked to in the portal in a long time. What he knows about protections, what he knows about the run game, they think that he could be a coach in his future. That's how smart this young man is. He gives you the ability of having versatility of what you do with DJ Chester, so on and so forth. And we've talked about the offensive line again. Could you move Chester to guard? He is a true guard. He could play right tackle for you too, but he is a true guard. He's probably not going to play center. You've recruited very well along your offensive line. Now you got a lot to replace. But Tyree Adams was a top 50 guy. Moore is arguably the best interior offensive lineman in the portal. DJ Chester, Solomon Thomas, Carius Kern, Weston Davis, the former 5-star. Guys, when you recruited that high of a level, you got to have the benefits of the reward of how you've been recruiting. It's a lot of inexperience. But when you have the experience at center, it takes a lot of load and burden off when you have a coach on the field with that amount of experience. I think the bowl game is massive for you and how you see that happening. All right, Tall Bayard, the safety from South Florida. I'm going to punt on that one for the moment. I think that whatever Delane does, we'll see. We'll see. But I think Mansoor Delane's decision is going to affect what Bayard does. So we'll see there. Here's what I'm going to say, too. As we start wrapping this up, and we'll talk about tight ends, and then we'll get out of here. Here's what I need to say to you as well. LSU is not done, and they're not close to being done. I think that there is going to be these playoff games that happen on Friday, Saturday, etc. And when these teams start losing, when these teams start getting out of the playoffs, some of these players that maybe even some that you're not expecting are going to enter the transfer portal. I would highly expect LSU to be very much involved in some of these players that maybe we're not expecting right now to enter the portal. There's a safety into the portal. Does an offensive lineman into the portal? What does it look like post-playoff run for some of these teams? Now, I will remind you that playoff teams, I mean, I know that the calendar and things like that are very interesting, and it needs to change. Depending on what teams lose, I think that you're going to start getting a really good idea of some players that enter the portal, some guys that you'll be going after. You're not close to being done. I know that Brian Kelly said that we are targeting and want to get around 12 players from the transfer portal. I don't know if I think that could be on the conservative side. It feels as if the LSU wants to be done with the portal and in the early window, and I don't blame them. And if something happens in the spring portal where a guy goes in for whatever reason, yes, you go after him. But we know some of the guys that are in the portal right now that they are targeting. I think that speaking with agents, this is just an assumption. They have spoken with some of these agents that represent some of these players that are in the playoff. I think that they have a really good idea of players that will be entering and guys that they want to target and even positions that they want to target of players that are going in. I think that your number could be up to as low as 12, as high as 15, 16. That's where I think LSU is going to stay and where they're going to be. I would go more on the high end. I'd go 14, 15, maybe even 16 players that you get out of the portal. The other needs that you will need, you need a tight end. I know that Bauer Sharp is committed to you, and I like Bauer Sharp. The speed that and versatility that he has as a receiver is high, very much high end. I don't know that if you have a guy outside of Bo Borderline that can line up on the end line of scrimmage and block. I like the Terrence Carter kid that committed to Texas Tech out of ULL. I wish that they would have gone after him. I thought he was a more athletic Thad Moss. Kid is a dominant dude in the running game. With that being said, is there somebody else at tight end that's going to enter the portal that you can go after? I think that you can go after right tackle. I think you can go after punter. I think that you can go after a linebacker, okay, or two. There's so many different things that you need. But I will continue to say this until I'm blue in the face, until Santa Claus lands on my roof and comes down the chimney. You need safety help. Tight end, safety. Tight end, safety. Those guys that go into the portal in the next couple of days, those guys that are available, you need to go get, and you need to go get them now. I'll tell you what I've done. I've spoken to people over the last couple of days. I think that this kid, Colin Weber from Charlotte, the tight end, 6'6", 271. Don't let the weight fool you. The kid is an athletic freak. He physically dominated everybody at the FCS level and FBS level. Physically dominated. I know Alabama's on him hard. Kid solves all your issues. He solves every issue that you have. Tight end and safety, man. You can really start solving some of your issues if you get a tight end, you get a couple of safeties, then you start feeling really good about yourself. You start feeling really good about you're all right. Just to rehash that, you're going to feel really good about where you're at and what you're doing there. So tight end and safety. All right, last thing before we get out of here. What does Harold Perkins do? What does Harold Perkins do? Going to be interesting. I think him not announcing, I think it speaks volumes. I would assume that he wants to, with all this money being flown around LSU, I'm sure he's going to want to restructure some things. Look, man, I think you're better with Harold Perkins. I think LSU not being able to figure out what they need to do with him is their problem and their fault. You got to get unique with him. But I do think it's interesting that we do not have a full-blown understanding of what Harold Perkins does. I would move him to edge. I would be specific on things that you do with him because he can rush the passer. Let him do it. So we'll see. All right, we'll see y'all tonight. Y'all have a good one.